Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thank you again for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up on our morning advisory chart, starting out up here along the northwest coast, it's a high surf advisory that's out for this evening, Sunday evening, until 10 p.m. there for the 40 to 50 mile per hour winds, creating surf that is expected to wash to the top of the beach, so there could be some minor erosion with that. And again, that's until late this evening. And now there's a high wind warning out for the Alaska Range, specifically through the passes, and that begins at 10 p.m. tonight and will remain out until 10 p.m. Monday. And that's for southerly winds are expected to increase with gusts to 70 miles per hour through the passes, and that will continue late tonight and continue through the day tomorrow and into tomorrow evening. And then there's an advisory there in the zone just on the north side. Winds less, mostly gusting about 40, 45 miles per hour there. Moving on to satellite imagery. Very nice day here along the southeast coast and southern Alaska. Not too bad in the central interior, but you can see moisture rapidly spreading northward here. Pretty good storm system rolling up toward Kodiak Island. Moderate rain having moved in Kodiak Island midday Sunday. Winds also coming up and back across the Alaska Peninsula. More clouds across the southwest interior, and still a lot of moisture spreading north and northeast, mostly associated with this weakening system back through here. And that's spreading out with a warm front right along the Arctic coast late this morning. And that'll be lifting off, taking the rain and snow with it later this evening and overnight tonight. Out west in the Aleutians, again, one weakening system right through here. The next one coming in, pushing some moisture in a fair amount into the Adak-Atka area and northward, and becoming more showery back out to the west. And that will continue to slowly move eastward, the whole frontal boundary really slowing down and will begin weakening. On the chart today, it's already done so here, kind of a weak system down to the south there, halting its eastward progression, but rain and fog across the central Aleutians and just approaching St. Lawrence Island this afternoon. Most of the moisture being directed up to the north and northeast as high pressure holds here over the interior. A few isolated showers now along the Brooks Range, and that's about it. Arctic coast, much milder temperature spreading on in behind the warm front here in the lower 40s to the west, and still carrying snow over at Kaktovik and Barter Island, which then a mixture back to the west of that. Otherwise, mostly sunny day here across the Copper River Basin, Tanana Valley, up into the upper Yukon, all the way down into south central Alaska. A lot of mid and high level clouds are already spreading in across the Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, even Prince William Sound area. Mostly sunny though from Yakutat all the way down to Dixon Entrance and the Queen Charlotte Islands into Canada. Pretty strong 1,033 millibar surface high sitting just north of Skagway. Moving on to tonight's forecast, we'll see this front, the low pressure area begins to cross the Aleutian Range and Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay. So as that happens, winds there will be diminishing, definitely along the peninsula. It'll stay quite windy even behind the front there at Kodiak Island, but possible even gale force winds associated with this trough, with rain heavy at times occurring from Kodiak up along into Kachemak Bay, southern Kenai Peninsula, over into the North Gulf Coast to about Cordova and back in toward Portage, with a chance of rain coming into Cook Inlet, mostly to the south tonight. Should stay dry through the Matanuska Valley, with a chance of rain mostly over the western Susitna Valley back to the Alaska Range. All of the southwest interior here looks has a really good chance of measurable precipitation overnight tonight, moving northward there. Just some showers, though, up around the Dehne area in the central Alaska range, increasing clouds over the Copper River Basin, and winds really not increasing too much here along the Alaska range tonight. Southeast coast staying fair. Look for some clouds here from about Port Alexander up to Elephant Cove and back. Otherwise, should stay mostly clear elsewhere there with winds continued light. And again, this warm front shifts northward, carrying the rain and snow with it. Mild temperatures following in behind with the clearing. Could see still a few isolated showers here over the Brooks Range, but nothing significant. Look for possible clearing out here over the St. Lawrence Island area into the Chukchi Sea. This front staying back to the west now with that low really weakening considerably there as it's right along the Russian coast. And this system here keeps it wet over the central Aleutians. Chance of rain for Nikolsky. And then higher pressure back out to the west. And right coming onto the edge of the picture there, the rain shield with the next storm. And so for tomorrow, you can see that advances eastward quite rapidly here with gusty winds, probably gale force westerlies with that. Rain, fog spreading eastward to roughly Amchitka Island. Being a little bit of a break there as that ridge shifts eastward across the Adak and Atka area. And the original front here really washes out. Just a weak trough really with the chance of showers moving into the Pribilof Islands. And then this system down to the south starts to pull off to the east, so just a chance of rain lingers with that along the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutians. And the low pressure area moves northwestward to about the Yukon Delta tomorrow afternoon. On Monday afternoon, a trough extending down across that will bring another shot of showers or rain into Kodiak, back across Bristol Bay and into the Bethel area, and Norton Sound staying wet. This trough lifting northward increases the rain and snow chances or the precipitation chances along mostly the southern slopes of the Brooks Range during the afternoon hours. Otherwise, just isolated rain or snow showers in the Arctic coast, generally dry up there. And the Tanana Valley, again with those wind warnings out along the Alaska Range, south to southeast, gusts 70 miles an hour. That's going to keep it dry, maybe even partly sunny here across the Tanana Valley into the 40-mile country. Just a chance of rain over areas of the Copper River Basin, but rain partly heavy at times here, or moderate at least, over western Prince William Sound or eastern Prince William Sound, and then rain finally creeping into the Yakutat area, but stays dry across the remainder of the southeast coast. Moving into Tuesday, that system takes a turn to the north here, quite weak though, down to 1,003 millibars, or weakens to 1,003 millibars, but still a good fetch of moisture with that. Will keep a narrow area of moderate to heavy rain from Cape Yakataga over to about Yakutat, lighter amounts into the northern panhandle. Otherwise, high pressure keeping it mostly sunny and mild down to the south. This front moves inland, weakens, but a band of rain or showers will be lightest here for Kodiak Island and a little more extensive up here through the western interior back to the northwest coast. Dry over the eastern interior, dry over the north slope and Arctic coast. And a warm front spreads rain, fog, and drizzle into the Pribilof Islands, extending down to the eastern Aleutians, and southwest winds just pull a lot of moisture northeastward here with the next front back to the west there. So more rain into the western Aleutians, spreading again to about Amchitka. Taking a look at the forecast lows for tonight, milder up here, lower 30s along the eastern Arctic coast to mid-20s in the Brooks Range, and still down into the 20s here over the eastern interior from the Eagle area down across Northway and Tok, and possibly into Nebezna. Otherwise, lows in the lower to mid-40s for south central Alaska tonight, and 40 to near 50 for northeast Bristol Bay and Kodiak. Then back into the lower 40s out toward Nikolsky, and that same temperature pattern on out along the Aleutians, with the southeast coast here looking mostly in the upper 30s to lower 40s. Forecast highs tomorrow. Not too bad, really pretty mild here for the Tanana Valley, up into the mid-50s. Again, with that southerly flow, keeping it dry and mild, and maybe even some sunshine. Down here over Bristol Bay, lower to mid-50s as well. Could see some lower 60s over the southern panhandle there across Prince of Wales Island. And temperatures rising to the 35 to 40 degree range across all the north slope and the Arctic coast. Looking at the lows for tomorrow night, we've got mid-20s, mid to upper 20s again here, really not much change up north there, and a little above freezing along the Arctic coast, and then upper 30s Seward Peninsula, 40s now from the Kobuk Valley southward to the northern Bristol Bay coast. Mid-40s to the Alaska Peninsula. Another mild night, mid-40s again, south central Alaska, Prince William Sound. Upper 20s to mid-30s, Copper River Basin. And then down the southeast coast, 40s. Looking at highs again for, looking at highs for Tuesday. We've got really lower 50s out here over the Aleutians. It stays mild up over the north slope and Arctic coast there. Continued southwest flow, so highs upper 30s to maybe lower 40s, and lower to mid 50s in the Tanana Valley.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather now. IFR here just along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. IFR along the Kenai Peninsula up into western Prince William Sound, back across Kodiak Island to the Alaska Peninsula. Much of the interior VFR all the way out, including the Arctic coast, with marginal VFR here over the east central Bering Sea, and a little bit of IFR over the central Aleutians. For tomorrow afternoon, next front pushing some IFR into the western Bering and Aleutians out that way with marginal eastward here, but looks like eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula will be in the VFR zone. Quite an area of marginal conditions out along the southwest coast and inland. And then some IFR now showing up along the east central Brooks Range, otherwise marginal along much of the Arctic coast. And a band of IFR here approaching the Panhandle, but mostly affecting the North Gulf Coast for tomorrow afternoon while it stays VFR over the southeast coast. And for Tuesday morning, VFR hangs in over the Panhandle, except becoming marginal up north. A little bit of IFR around the Yakutat area, marginal back to the west across Prince William Sound, and some lingering marginal VFR along the western Alaska Range. Otherwise, south central Alaska becoming VFR as well as the eastern interior. A little bit of marginal VFR central Arctic coast, IFR there, northern Norton Sound, and then a more extensive area of IFR pushing eastward toward the Pribilof Islands, covering much of the central and western Aleutians, but staying VFR for the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak Island. And then for Tuesday afternoon, that IFR pushes eastward here and spreads up to the Bering Strait and western Seward Peninsula, and then back down along and just north of the western Aleutians. IFR now expanding here along the North Gulf Coast, but mostly staying west of the Panhandle, and VFR are restricted to Susitna Valley, Matanuska Valley, and Cook Inlet, with IFR developing again along the western Alaska Range, all along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. For tomorrow, Anatuvik, VFR becoming marginal as moisture slides northward. Same forecast for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR with likely IFR on both eastern approaches, with rainy, just occasionally marginal. Windy, marginal VFR will be on the southern entrance. And for Isabel, marginal, and also Mentasta, marginal, with Tanita, same forecast, occasionally marginal. And for Portage, IFR. Chilcoot and White, another VFR day, at least for one more day. And then the freezing levels, upper ridge shifting eastward here, so we've got the warm air aloft here into western Canada now, down across the eastern Gulf and Panhandle, and then kind of a 4,000 to 6,000 foot condition here over the interior. Out in the Bering, a little cooler, 2,000 feet there down to near the Pribilofs. Icing wise, maybe up around the Brooks Range there, southwest interior areas of mostly above about 6,000 feet. Out west increasing with the next storm system, and then occasional moderate or widespread moderate possible here, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound areas above about 8,000 feet. Looking at the jet stream, south to north flow, a trough now replacing the ridge, having moved eastward here and weakening, but that's keeping the northerly flow at about 70 knots here, mostly east of the Panhandle. Southerlies 120 up to Kodiak Island, falling back to 60 over the interior areas there. And for the 9,000 foot winds, looking like this, south to southeast here, a little more southeasterly along the North Gulf Coast, but up to 50 knots in through here, falling back to about 30 knots along the north coast of the Panhandle, with the stronger 50-knot winds hanging back to the west. Southern southeast coast more in that 10 to 15 knot range. And the Arctic coast, we've got some 35-knot winds at this elevation on the east side, otherwise at about 25 for the northern North Slope and back to the western coast. And some pretty good winds here over the interior with this low lifts northward And again, at 9,000 feet, 35 knots, up to 40 knots there, crossing the western Alaska range, and then falling back considerably here across the Seward Peninsula and into the northern Bering, ridging, poking up over the western Bering, but the next system coming in will kick those winds up to 55 knots. And that same pattern, much at 3,000 feet here, winds increasing out there toward the far western Aleutians, otherwise 20 to 25. And we've still, and south to north flow here, 30 to 50 knots into the Gulf of Alaska, and 20 to 25 here at 3,000 feet over the southwest interior, actually northward all the way to the Arctic coast. Turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop here from about Cape Yakataga down, mostly off the Panhandle, and here Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, eastern Arctic coast, occasional moderate chop, as well as the western Aleutians.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space, and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not necessarily a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat
squished
it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It is just
moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make one lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. Why? What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah. You could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
Takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles up. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites, and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
The same speed.
Right.
Okay.
The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot.
Oh, I see.
And it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture, you can replay that and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called, because they're stationary in appearance, and they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures that if you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is we're up on the very top of the planet. And for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit,
Okay.
which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth, getting down toward International Space Station elevation. And they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this. And the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail, the kind of detail because you're close in.
Very high resolution.
You couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by,
Right.
and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits. Each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right. Okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years? Amazing
it's
stuff.
a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on Dehne and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis made on Sunday. Some areas of new ice forming. It doesn't show on the graphic here, but there are some areas of new ice forming inside the barrier islands, especially as you get over toward Kaktovik and those areas, and expected to slowly continue for the next few days. But up here to the north, new ice forming along the outer ice edge now, and that will continue over the next 4 or 5 days. Moving on to the coastal forecast here, small craft advisories on the south coast, gales on the north coast here with seas 13 to 15 feet and then down to 6 feet for the extreme south coast. Light southeast winds over the inside waters. Northern Lynn Canal, though, we'll see 20 knots from the south with 4-foot seas. And for the Tuesday outlook, 30 knots here on the south coast. Otherwise, that next storm coming northward bring gales back up to 40 knots here for the north coast and even up to, or 35 knots there a little bit farther to the west. Southerly winds 20 knots, gusts 35 for northern Lynn Canal, and then easterlies at 20, gusts 35 for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait southeast at 20. Prince William Sound still 45 knot winds in the forecast there for tomorrow with 12-foot seas. Otherwise 40 to 45 knot winds for the eastern North Gulf Coast, and then coming down to 30 here on the west side. Barren Islands, southeast winds 25. Westerly gales for Kachemak Bay, also gales, southern Cook Inlet, northeast 35, and pretty brisk north of the Forelands with 30 knot winds. Then for Tuesday, those come down considerably. Just a breeze now out of the north for Cook Inlet, northwest coming down to 20 knots for Kachemak Bay and the Barrens, and also for the western North Gulf Coast. But again, the next storm moving northward brings gales back to the eastern North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound coming up again in the afternoon, northeast 30. Kodiak Island, south 30 knots tomorrow. Shelikof Strait, southeast at 25. Small craft advisories here for the Alaska Peninsula. West winds 25 knots, turn southwest at 30 there from Castle Cape to Sitkinak. Small craft advisories for Bristol Bay. And the outlook for Tuesday, lighter winds there in the bay with westerlies at 15. Also the peninsula, the Bering Sea side, southwest 20, 15 knot winds on the south side with still 8-foot seas though. And northwest, pretty light from Sitkinak to Castle Cape at 10 knots, 20 knots there east of Kodiak Island. Diminishing winds for Shelikof Strait as well. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, pretty good in the winds, northwest 10 to 15, and then picking up northwest 25 to 30 here out over the central Aleutians. Gales coming back into the picture over the far western Aleutians. And then for the Tuesday outlook, southwest winds, pretty uniform wind pattern here across the central and western Aleutians, all at 30 knots, falling back to 20 to 25 there across Unalaska Island. And then for the southwest coast, northwest 25 south of Nunivak Island, southeast 10 for the Pribilofs, and northeast 15 there for St. Lawrence Island. Looking at Tuesday, southwest 10, pretty light there for St. Lawrence Island. Southerlies at 20 knots, St. Matthew Island, Pribilof southwest. Light winds here 15 to 20 along the coast. Up along the western Arctic coast, we've got easterlies at about 20 knots, 15 to 20 knot winds here from Cape Beaufort southward to Wales with 4 to 6 foot seas. Small craft advisories though on the east side here, 25 to 30 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet. And that pretty much holds through Tuesday as well. Small craft advisories, seas a little higher though, 9 to 10 feet there and up to 8 feet in the central coast. Southeast 20 with 4 foot seas on the west side, and light south to southwest winds at 10 from Wales to Cape Beaufort. For tonight again, this front really weakening and not making much eastward progress there. This low approaching the Aleutians, doesn't quite make it but keeps it wet there from Adak and Atka over toward Nikolsky. This storm bringing the gale force winds, rain heavy at times here, North Gulf Coast back down to Kodiak Island to Kachemak Bay as the front moves northward. Winds increase here across the North Gulf Coast areas, stays fair over the Panhandle. And then for tomorrow, that low tracks northwestward, weakens, but pretty good shower shot here coming in with this trough into Bristol Bay. Yukon Delta front slowly moving eastward and weakening, but still keeping it wet along the North Gulf Coast, south central Alaska to the northwest there. High wind warning for the Alaska Range, gusts 70 miles an hour for tomorrow and tomorrow evening. That'll keep the Tanana Valley dry. And then for Tuesday, more rain on the eastern North Gulf Coast, and another storm comes in from the west. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.